All right. In the words of Billy Madison, back to
Uh,
school to show the listeners we are not fools. It's school time. Ryan, your kids are going to kindergarten? Kindergarten?
Pre-K2, Pre-K3, very
Mm.
serious stuff.
Price, your kids pretty soon. You have a broader array of ages.
well, yeah, they started yesterday, so we've got third grader, first grader, and then 2-year-old at the pool right now, just rocking the goggles. He's chilling. So
Well, more broadly, we're all getting some homework because we're headed into a busy season of regulation, of federal litigation, perhaps, of lots of stuff coming to close out the year as we head towards the deadlines. The tests will come January 1st for many payers. But before we get into all this, Brad, you went to DC to meet the teachers, did you not?
I did. We had our 1 year anniversary for the CMS health tech ecosystem. This is what, fourth event that they've held in Washington so far for it, fourth or fifth. There's a couple things that really stick out, but one of them is Amy Gleason has hit her stride. She's not in this to be Usain Bolt. She's going to be the marathon runner that's going to break the world record. They've now got over 40 people working in product. They have continue to expand the number of categories that they want to encourage entities to participate in. And like one of the biggest noticeable things at this event versus other events is your big legacy players have showed up in force and they are pledging to more categories than maybe they initially wanted to. So I think that's a good sign that maybe the industry is adopting that co-opetition is positive. Some of the really big takeaways though for me is there are polarizing figures in this administration. Chris Klomp was absolutely perfect in articulating the vision of the health tech ecosystem, identifying that this has nothing to do with politics and it is really about returning control to patients. I thought he was the best speaker by far at the entire event. It's awesome that he is moving into higher positions of power because I'd watch that guy talk about health tech all day long. No offense to anybody else who speaks about it. I think he's fantastic. And we're seeing all of the EHRs, the major EHRs are showing up and figuring out how they want to participate. We're seeing some of the newer kids on the block who maybe didn't have as big of a health tech footprint beforehand getting deprioritized or seen as necessary but not sufficient actors in the space. So identity really was this first category of tools depended on patient identity. And so Clear and ID.me were omnipresent, but really we saw a lot more of your Epics, your Meditechs, et cetera. And we got payers. So most of the major payers were present, which was, again, very cool to see. And then got to give a shout out to Be Well for committing to every single category just so that Liz Lewis can't sleep at night and has to be running every work group. But it has come a super long way. We're seeing a lot of maturity. The big question is going to be breadth versus depth and whether or not they can do both. Amy seems to be confident that they can, but the next year will really be which one of these categories stick and they continue to invest in.
It's such a dichotomy across the board, like tremendous successes and things that aren't real mixed all together. You have them threatening regulation on one hand, right? Like you better go do this voluntarily. We're going to make you do it, 3 times over. But then have like Oz on stage be like, why aren't you more like Uber? Why aren't you going and breaking laws? It's like there's all these like sort of like fun dichotomies and ironies, but like they're getting shit done and they're going to go put it in HDI 6 to make it happen. Some of these capabilities, right? The industry has proven out many of these capabilities. And so then they're going to go say, okay, this gets the pilot out there, the jet boats, and then we're going to go get everyone to do it. It seems very logical that that's what we'll see. That's what struck me when I was watching the recording is just the bipolar nature of it, the dichotomy of it across the board.
The one other thing that I felt in seeing big names present in that room is this is taking us way back. I started a health tech company almost a decade ago, and I knew basically zero about healthcare. And it was really, really, really hard for me to find people that would teach me how things actually worked. And so it was through a process of trial and error. I think a undernoted and very cool thing about the health tech ecosystem is that if you are willing to participate, no matter the size of your entity, you can be on calls with, executives from Epic or Meditech and understand what are their workflows and their requirements. I don't know that we're going to be able to measure this, but if we could, I think we will see a acceleration of startups understanding traditional healthcare workflows for things like prior authorization, whereas their previous approach may have been like, I'm just going to screen scrape everything and break the system. They now understand, or they can understand, why the system works the way it does and start to operate inside of it.
So you're saying the teachers made a good curriculum for us ahead. Is that what I'm
Yeah.
hearing?
Yeah. We're going back to school and we got a great syllabus.
And one of those pieces of the curriculum is prior authorization. We have already that deadline for 0057, January 1st. There's 0062 hanging out as a proposed rule. And now the CMS Health Tech ecosystem has that prior authorization work group. Price, you've been probably the deepest of anyone on the team working with payers, some delegated vendors, clearinghouses on prior auth. What do you think? How are we going to do?
I'm nervous. Everyone who's working in the 0057 space right now is feeling like, holy cow, I can't believe folks are going to try to start using this in production on January 1st. And, it is an administrative workflow. So I'm not like, to me, it's not like a patient safety escalation or something like that. I'm not gonna start shouting from the rooftop that everyone needs to like protest outside of the Humphreys building in DC and get 0057 pushed back by a year or anything like that. For me, the biggest thing that I think people don't realize is that we kind of act like the prior authorization problem is health systems need to speak with payers. And right now, it's a very administratively burdensome process. And it's a terrible time in the life of the patient, that if they're getting permission from their insurance company to do something from a medical perspective, then they might be sick or they might be anxious to figure out why they're sick and it takes too long, blah, blah, blah. But we simplify it to like the EHR should be talking to the payer systems. And so if we just had 3 easy steps. Doctors love these 3 easy steps where you can figure out if you need prior auth. You can figure out what information you should be providing your payer so they can determine if you have authorization for the procedure. And then you submit the actual case. And that is framed, I think in a way that everyone can understand. But what people don't understand is that each of those EHRs then needs to figure out, to whom am I connecting? As my top 5 payers, or am I going to connect to, my clearinghouse, and my clearinghouse is going to promise to facilitate the exchange or the routing of this prior authorization request to the right payer. And then it gets to the payer and it's a clearinghouse who maybe has never dealt with prior authorization exchange before, or prior authorization exchange using FHIR, like the Da Vinci standard. And then they are like a layer that will receive it and perhaps pass it to another system, which does CRD, who might talk to another system which houses the questionnaires for DTR, who then might pass the case onto a third system that's one of 10 utilization management delegated vendors at a particular payer. It's one of the first in a very long time instances in health tech where we're saying like, okay, everyone should start using this functionality on this date. And there's like a gajillion permutations of how and to whom you would connect to. And so any slight variability in how people interpret the specs, or, like let's say one clearinghouse has a bug, like it's going to be millions of prior authorizations that fail electronic transmission. And then what? So I'm concerned from an operational perspective. The tech will work itself out. I don't know. What have you all been hearing from folks who are really in the prior auth weeds right now?
I love Scott Rossignol's idea he posted somewhere, or maybe it was Josh Mandel, but like most people gravitate to this where they're like, wait a minute. If we just had payers post their policy, all of it publicly, we could LLM that stuff and just have it. Instead of the DTR is like, here's a little bite-sized chunk. Here's a little bite. Oh, you want a little more? Here's a taste. Here's a little taste. And like that back and forth has a million rough edges, to your point, that can break. Even when, if you imagine this beautiful scenario where it's like the EHR, the provider system, and the payer system, which is like you're saying, a million subsystems in a trench coat, like take away that. Pretend it's just one system. If even just like looking at the back and forth, this client and server and client and subscriptions and CQL, and it's like it's going to break. There's 100 edges that it will break and that they can find for variance, and it's just going to suck. And so the idea of just like front load it and then just you can shoot over the documentation you need, and it's either, I mean, like a simpler transaction makes a lot of sense. We're not going to get that, but go back in time and reinvent this, and that's what you would do. MCG interqual be damned. Like that to me is logical, but we don't exist in that world. We exist in a world where there is that complexity and there's a million subsystems that just haven't really been accounted for and need to also play in this space and meet the deadline.
Just to be clear, like some of the biggest players in the industry are like, okay, we need to get this set up. Let me see your specs. And then whomever they're talking to is like, yeah, let me see your specs. Let's make sure our specs match. And neither side has specs, and neither side has built it. Some payers are figuring out who they're going to use as like the interop layer for their DaVinci implementation. And this is supposed to turn on in what is it, 4 months? So it's going to be a little heinous. Biggest concern for me is like what could have been a jump from terrible administrative burden to like computers doing what they're good at and making everything more efficient. Instead, it's going to be like if providers have a bad experience with this for 3 months, they're just going to stop using it as often as they're allowed to by their employers or by the MIPS payments that they're receiving or not receiving.
I think sometimes we flatten when we look at a workflow and its constraints, we assume that those constraints are directly related to motivations. But like vectorizing a policy is just creating an understanding of a snapshot in time. Payers have utilization management because they need to control spend. And so if there are easier ways to potentially gamify that, then they're going to change the rules. So this is a can of worms that maybe we don't have the time to unpack today, but I think a major problem in assuming that we can and should automate something is that we miss what the external friction is.
No, I think you're right. It's like, okay, great, we made it cheap, the transaction cheap, but like it's still the tension of, are you going to approve this or not? Doesn't change. It's just the speed at which that decision gets made or not made changes. The last thing that really grinds my gears about this situation we put ourselves in is that HTI4 buried in the the inpatient rule last year, got rid of the light DTR option, really yoked it to the EHR. Like we're in this era of like, we gotta like empower these alternative solutions, and like the EHRs are too powerful, and we do regulation that is literally geared such that you must have it either be in the EHR or as a supporting technology. Like the EHR says, okay, we're using Dorina as our chosen technology for prior authorizations. How can you go on stage and make these pronouncements and then go and get rid of the optionality for light DTR, which is more of like launch the smart app that does your prior authorization? Bryce, do you agree with that? You were working on this?
Oh, 100%. So just to explain to the audience the paradigm here, let's say I'm a doctor, place an order for an MRI, should get an immediate response effectively if the backend systems are set up and connected that says, hey, you do need to request prior authorization for this order. And here are the questions that the payer has in order for them to determine whether or not they're going to authorize this. That here are the questions comes across in the form of a FHIR questionnaire. And at the moment, the EHR must support receiving those questions, showing them to the user, and the user can answer them in the EHR. That's called native, the native flow, where the provider stays native to the EHR and answer those questions that go back to the payer. But there are vendors who do like way cooler stuff with clinical data that help you answer the question way faster. And that could be a smart app. So let's say I place that same MRI order and then boom, because my analysts set it up this way, instead of the questionnaire coming back into the EHR, it actually automatically pops open a smart app window with my questionnaire app. And there's a field in that one that says like, just drop all the documentation about Brendan and I'll run AI through it and propose answers for you. I'm like, gosh, damn, that's so cool. That's what generative AI should be doing. And somebody's out there building it because all they care about is prior auth. Meanwhile, the EHRs are getting the regulatory capture and not forced to support that bolt-on system, which is light DTR flow. So that's the difference between native and light DTR. And it's a silly nuance, and I guess just a bunch of nerds care about it. But in a year,
We are those nerds.
a bunch
Us.
of providers are going to care about it. So I'm bummed about that, but I don't know. Folks smarter than I wrote those rules, so we'll see where they go.
So I'm curious here, and we're going to get into kind of new regulation coming here, HCI 5, HCI 6. Like we'll get more detail into that. But taking the lens of like HCI 5's coming in, it was very deregulatory, right? It was trying to strip out the old news, the things that didn't matter anymore. HCI 6 is now rebuilding that, but with more fire-based standards. But from what you're saying with how 057's looking, right? We don't know what's going to happen once January 1st hits, but not great signals because it seems like potentially IGs might be a little too broad, or at least we don't understand what's going to happen behind the scenes once the message gets there. What do you think, like, what could have been better for 057 here? Was it more strict regulation, whereas it seems like we're not moving that way? Is it not building in the how, but instead focusing on like the actual why behind the workflow? Because I don't really know the answer because and maybe it's you just need to meet this end goal. You can accomplish it how you want, but then that's very broad and everybody will have a different interpretation. It'll be hard to play together. It's like maybe with that lens price, do you think there's anything that could have made 0057 better as we're getting to this point of what looks like will be chaos?
Yeah, it would have been great if in the rule they like mandated everyone to use HTD consulting for, for the services that they need. I'm just
We
kidding.
offer prior authorization services.
This next segment brought to you by, it's hard to say because I think like the problem to be solved, Ryan, not the regulation or how they wrote the regulation, but the problem to be solved is part of the issue because, like Brendan said, it's like take a bunch of different software systems who have never had to do challenging interop before. And maybe they're all even small because none of them are like gigantic core administrative processing systems like Trizetto or gigantic EHRs like Epic. So you've got all these like green newbies that are like, I think we're supposed to do something for the CMS by January 1st. And then you gave them like the hardest IG of all time to implement, like hands down. So maybe it shouldn't have been a boil the ocean approach. Maybe we should have started with like CRD, like get your most health tech eager analysts to set up like CDS decision support with regards to coverage requirement discovery, and you'll submit, and then you'll get to submit 60% of the prior auths that you usually submit because 40% of them you'll realize you don't even need prior auth. Maybe that's what we needed was a little bit of step steering, but this whole administration has been, and this is what I was thinking when you were talking about the health tech ecosystem, Brad. They're throwing spaghetti at the wall and they're going to see what sticks and they're going to see who succeeds and who survives. And then they'll regulate, or there will be carrots and sticks that they create in reaction to how the market sort of adjusts. But yeah, it's a little bit ruthless. It's like we just got thrown into the water by our belt loops and we're going to figure it out.
All right, Tom Sawyer. Yeah, we're gonna figure it out. And like, look, I appreciate the focus on the workflow. It's just the shape of it is contorted by these weird oddities we have in the industry of like MCG and Interqual not wanting to give up their policy because it's their IP and their business. Like, I don't blame them for that. Like, that is how they make money, but it contorts a lot of this into maybe a less useful shape than if we thought about it de novo. What else are we thinking about de novo for the rest of the curriculum, for the rest of the fall? What take home tests are coming? What you know books are we reading?
I don't know. You tell us. You're the TA. I'm forgetting. Like we have HTI5 finalizing, and then Ryan was just saying we have a proposed HTI6. When is the comment period over? When does that finalize?
Is that towards November?
We know from the unified agenda that HDI5 will be this month, right? That they're trying to finalize in August. That will be that deregulatory rule with where they deregulate away parts of information blocking in a way that EHRs aren't super psyched about. And then they have HDI6, which we don't know what's in it. It'll come out in November or something like that, but should have a lot of new API stuff, is what they've hinted. So all that's coming. Federal lawsuit against Epic, rumored to be coming. We don't know what that's about, but we shall see. And then, of course, the test on Jan 1 with prior authorization. So lots of fun stuff. What do you guys want to see in HTI 6?
Lately, what I've been thinking a lot about is like agentic movement with AI, right? And Brendan, I think what you brought up in terms of like publish your spec out there, let an agent just kind of cater the transaction building and message building to what needs to be happening there. I think that would be really interesting. I know some of that was covered in HTI5, right? There was some around agentic execution, but more fire forward standards, general moving forward. But that would be interesting to me.
Yeah, fire subscriptions is what I'm most interested in. I think by a pretty long shot. But the subscriptions work group in the CMS health tech ecosystem is like just encounters and appointments, encounters and appointments. It's a little bit too small of a need to like, start jumping up and down for. But having an API that you can subscribe to for proactive event notification is the most insane thing that we haven't regulated yet.
You make a really good point. There are many ways for the ONC to F this up in HTI 6. And so commentary will be important. But like one that you just highlighted is are there the right triggers and data types, right? If we are trying to accomplish a goal, subscriptions is really broad. It can be used for a lot of different things. And if they just have it for encounters, well, it's like, okay, is it sending every new update? Is it sending just on certain triggers? Like those details will matter about it accomplishing a goal. I wrote an article a couple weeks ago about, okay, if they just look at Argonaut's work and adopt the patient subscription, which is an IG that profiles subscriptions to accomplish a workflow, you could easily be like, all right, Argonaut never misses. Like, let's just copy that. The Argonaut, like, they did great work focused around, I am a patient app or I have a single patient and I want to listen to updates to that patient. Like, that's supplementation. That's not enrollment. And what people yearn for and want is not better supplementation, better ingestion of a patient once you know about them as relevant to you. Great, like hurrah. But what we want is ability to kick off a workflow because we can't poll right now. We can't search across and say, show me all new orders. We can't listen and say, show me all new orders, or like, let me listen for new encounters. Enrollment is this big unsolved problem that prevents 99% of apps from being Fire native. And so we need to make sure that's an HTI 6, or we're just going to look and be like, great, now we have slightly better supplementation and still I have to start with HL7v2 or another thing as my enrollment step.
So you're calling for the death of ADTs.
Look, like, do we want to live in a world where it's Fire only? Then we would need to go after enrollment. You can't reliably assume that an EHR has HL7v2 ADTs. From certification criteria only, you don't get a uniform enrollment step. There is no technology.
Wait, but I have a prediction.
What's that?
So what I've been doing when you've heard my keyboard typing is, if we take a look at the health tech ecosystem, it looked like an ooze, but actually there are very clear motivations or things that certain people in power want to see. We've also seen a ton of CMS programs launched. It feels like at rapid pace. And so I was just trying to figure out, what is the intersection of balance, tempo, access, and elevate? This group is smart enough to know that they can use HTI 6 to unlock that. So I'm mid-research, mid-pod. So I'm going to get you guys a better explanation after I can think about it more. But
I'm like, man, is he writing us out for a prior authorization deal right now for the payers and delegated vendors that we help?
I do think connectivity to TEFCA or these nationwide networks, as opposed to directly into the EHR, is there's going to be something around network access and whether or not that ropes in HIEs or their new HINs on a state-based level, or it's all at the national level. I would not be surprised if there was some sort of effort for regulated devices to have connectivity, whether that's like cellular connectivity built in, and then like tracking. There's no way that CMS is going to pay for GLP-1s and not try and track things like blood pressure, weight, et cetera, which fits into the access model. My wild out there hypothesis, based on 3 minutes of Googling and writing, is that we are going to see devices that wouldn't have normally fallen under certified health IT somehow getting roped in positively, like giving them an incentive that, hey, if you add cellular connectivity to your blood pressure cuff, we know that's going to get us better readings, and maybe it ships like pre-integrated with TEFCA, and we'll increase your reimbursement by 50 cents a reading or something. HEI 6 and the payment models are not connected, but I think we're going to see something.
We like those intersects. Like, that's good. That's good. All right, FMK. So we got Fire subscriptions. We got bulk Fire. We have agentic access. So, like, what are you feeling for HTI 6 in regards to those three technologies? Which ones would you keep or cut?
Wait, what was the last one you said? We got bulk fire. Oh,
Fire subscriptions, and agentic access.
agentic access in what form here? Are we just saying like EHR, like it's info blocking for EHRs to not allow agentic access, which is already true, or are you saying like?
Well, we don't know. We don't know, but like, they've sort of alluded, like MCP or coin, right, is the technology that some people have started to play with in the healthcare setting of conversational interop, or like just allow screen scraping. Who knows? But like HTI 5 said the information blocking stuff as proposed, where it said agentic access can be EHI exchange. HTI 6 would be some sort of certification requirement. So we don't know the shape of it, but you get to choose it. You get to choose a little bit.
Okay, well, if this is a which would you rather, I definitely have my answer, but does anybody else want to go first? Brad?
Well, I'm ready.
Your hand
Ryan,
is
are
up.
you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I think the most clear one for me, so I'm not going to go in order, but I'm going to enter matrimony with Fire subscriptions. We need better signaling, and this brings our data model like forward multiple decades. So I think that's the one we want to be with for a long time. If you disagree with me, you're wrong. The complicated part for the other two, And I got to say, I'm sorry, bulk fire, but you got to go. And the reason for that
Anish
is
Chopra is sad as he listens to this.
maybe not. Because, if we've got agents that are able to vectorize that data, it doesn't matter what formats it's in. Could we not just do a giant data dump in whatever your data model is and do some sort of probabilistic estimation of, I think this is a HbA1c number? If this is our decision set, unfortunately, bulk fire, you are the weakest link.
Ryan, what do you got?
Maybe I'm going to cheat the game a little bit here, but I'm going to go similarly to Brad in my F, right? I think from Brennan's description, right?
Flirting,
Agentic
to be
usage is
clear.
a little flirty, right? Like you don't know what it's going to be. And frankly, the next day, you don't know if you're going to call it back, right? Like we'll see what happens there. That would be my F. Marriage, I'm going to say bulk transactions. I'm going to say usage for population. Like, can I actually set up my day for my whole organization? I'm not going to say bulk fire because I think if we're saying marriage, yeah, fire's been around a while, but we've seen many. We've seen HL7, V2, V3, V4, right? So I don't know if fire is going to be around when I'm 90, right? So that I think like bulk transactions is what I'm more interested in marriage and seeing where that goes. And then I guess I got to kill subscriptions, even though I think like in the near term, that's probably what I want. Like I'd like to date subscriptions right now if I could, but I think that's outside of the rules of the game. So I'll stop at that.
You're wrong.
Okay.
Price, what are we thinking?
What do I want the most? For sure, subscriptions. Brendan, to your point, like, okay, we've got these nearly ubiquitous nationwide networks. They're query only. Okay. Everyone has to make a Fire API available, query only. How is a new clinic going to hear about a patient? How is a new telehealth app going to hear about a patient? How is a remote patient monitoring cardiology program going to hear about a patient? It's always an event triggered subscription or like, an HL7 ADT, SIU, ORM. Those have been tried and true for us for longer than we've been alive, at least most of us. And sorry to the analysts who are listening that are like, I was implementing ADT in 1989. But yeah, it's time we have something set like in place that EHRs are forced to support so that information blocking matters. If you can't even figure out which patients you're supposed to treat and why and when, then half of the companies that I know that do cool work are running off of like manually copied reporting workbench reports to figure out who they should be treating. And that's just insane to me. So I would want subscriptions to include like upcoming encounters or encounter registration, discharge, things like that, appointments, but also orders. And if we don't get orders, then I am going to be like, what the hell is all this for? I don't really like AI right now, just in general. Lots of mixed feelings. I saw some robots fighting today on LinkedIn, and I was like, I don't like that at all. So I'm going to go with bulk fire for number two. I also think it's like a nice stepping stone for all of these developers. It's like, hey, now you could offer something that's like a SQL search, but it's for other people. You can understand that. That would be nice. And if we ask them all to implement MCP and we expect it to be as good as like Databricks, natural language queries, it's just not. It's going to be garbage. So I'm ready to stay away from the agentic stuff for another couple years.
I'm gonna bend the rules too. Like I'm gonna do a thruple with bulk fire and subscriptions. Like let's see the fire stuff through. Let's see if this solves everything. And then we're gonna have to kill agents because I don't need Dario Amodei to get any more of my money. We don't need data centers, and we're not ready. I think we started. We're like, well, what are we going to require? It's like, if we're asking that, we're probably not ready to put in requirements if we don't know, is it MCP or what? So I think there's potential for HTI 7 or 12 or something. But for now, burial for agents. With that, we're at time. Thank you all. We'll see you on the next one.